there guys, it's Joey and today's video is a request. So this will be in the Working Witch series, the sort of hands-on witchcraft series that is part and parcel of the YouTube channel. And this is how to use witch spell oils. So firstly, apologies, I'm not going to be on camera for this one. I kind of ummed and ahed about it, but I've been feeling kind of under the weather a bit and it took quite a bit to get on camera yesterday. So I decided just to create this video without my face on it, sorry. Maybe it's a relief, who knows. And I'm going to talk a little bit first about what spell oils are to me. I'm going to feature two of my own from Starry-Eyed Supplies. I've got an example of one other as well. So in front of you, you can see Crow Priestess, which is one of my favourites currently. And let's just have the description of Crow Priestess, it's easier. If you want to peer into the if you want English, find a different channel. Anyway, if you want to peer into the myriad of possibilities to divine the future, to seek the mysteries and the unknown, then the Crow Priestess energy can guide you on quivered wings through this journey of self-discovery. The Crow Priestess speaks, there is no mystery that cannot be viewed through the eyes of Crow. No death goes unseen in the attributed climax of the Margu's destiny. She sees all. Prophecy is Crow speak, the dead consumed is rebirth. The relationship between the goddess Morrigan and one of her most well-known symbols, the crow, is a rich, complex tapestry that speaks to the dynamic nature of the goddess herself. Firstly, the aspect Bave can be literally translated as meaning crow and is associated with the hooded crow in particular, and she appears to shapeshift into the visage of a crow to inspire fury into warriors on the battlefield, emboldening them and in order so that they fight and die in her name. The Celts also believed that the physical presence of crows eating fallen warriors was the consumption of their souls, which were then carried to the other world to be reborn. A crow was also said to have been present at the moment of Cuchulain's death to mark him as the Morrigan's favoured warrior and fulfil the prophecy that she would guard his death, and fulfills an earlier prophecy where Morrigan predicted and attempted to warn Cuchulain against arrogant actions that would lead to his downfall. The presence of Crow is marking the end of the prophecy as well as Cuchulain's life. Crow energy is mysterious, tied to secrets, prophecy and death. It is said that crows perceive time outside of linear limitation and have known knowledge of the past, present and future as a result. Their energy in this capacity, along with the goddess Morrigan's penchant for prophecy, that's awesome if I do say so myself, makes this particular spell oil a powerful tool of divinational energy and useful in self-knowledge rituals. It also carries the energy of the shapeshifter to shift and change and fly above, to adapt, evolve and grow, particularly in the sacred mysteries. So if all of this is sort of like, okay, why do we need to know the energies of this particular spell oil, Joey? It's because of how I view what spell oils actually are. And I think that a lot of the time in a lot of channels of information, a lot of the online information tend to sort of encourage you to use spell oils without really a full examination of why it is we use spell oils and what spell oils mean to us. Now, this is by no means a definitive guide or anything like that. This is just my perceptions and how I view what a spell oil is. Some of the little differences between what I think certain types of spell oils embody, and then after this we're going to have all sorts of editing whilst I move us around showing different ways of which you can use spell oils. It's going to be an edit fest, you're going to love it, honest. But I think it's better for me to actually physically show you some of the different ways in which you can use spell oils, and that was the request, how do we actually use them? But I think it's important in the beginning to sort of have a bit of a discussion about what I perceive spell oils to be as a magical tool. So I actually view them quite a lot like a potion or an elixir, if you like. It is the infusion of different magical components in order to create an energetic matrix within the bottle, within the potion itself, within the spell oil. And it brings together many different elements of magic, of spirituality, of symbolism and significance in order to create a potent little magical tool to enable you to create magic, to direct magical flow easier, more efficiently, and with a perhaps gusto, with a elevated energetic burst. Now, not all spell oils are the same as how I personally create and sell them on Starry-Eyed Supplies. For example, this is a lovely little spell oil with black narcissus in it, and this is considered to be a magical oil, and it's literally the infusion of a herb into a magical oil. So this is slightly different to what I personally perceive that a spell oil should be, and are the only type that I sell, and that is the combination of a webbing, a weaving together of different elements that then create a magical potion. And I kind of do this in two ways. I think this is probably the easiest way to try and describe it to you. There are two different kind of spell oils that I personally engage in the creation process as part of my witchcraft, and this is based on my many years of study and then practice and feeling out what works for me. And the first kind is what Crow Priestess is, which is more of a potion, and then the second one, which I've got some of here, and there's actually in a skull pipette for ease, this is Blade Over Shield. And as you can see, if you can, there you go, there's some Blade Over Shield. I've just made some recently, and I use a lot of this. This is a distilled version. So the distilled version, let's pop it there. So the distilled version of spell oils contain as many, if not more, ingredients as, say, the potion form, but they are literally distilled. So they will, for example, Blade Over Shield has 9 different components of herbs that go into it, and they are left to infuse, and then they are distilled through my magical means to create the end product, which is slightly more clear, and it doesn't have all the bits floating around in it for sake of ease of explaining it. I tend to think the distilled ones have a little bit more of a kick. They take... Is that fair? Do they have more of a kick? I don't know. They have a different energy matrix to them because there is kind of like this extra step, this extra magical energy put into it. So I guess, yeah, they have a little bit more of a kick in my personal opinion, I guess, because for putting together the spell oils, all the separate ingredients are imbued with energy and magic, and are all a magical energy all onto themselves. So the different components come together as magical ingredients in order to create a energy matrix, if that makes sense. I'm hoping it's not too wordy. I'm very aware of how it works in my head, and then not being too wordy with how I describe it. So it's the coming together, the joining, the marriage of different magical components that are then elevated, infused into a carrier, which on Starry-Eyed Supplies it's all natural ingredients. There is no synthetic ick. There is essential oils, natural herbs, and then natural base oil. And I don't like the ick that goes into some spell oil. Some people don't care, but I think personally I prefer an all natural ingredient, and so there's no mineral oil in anything that I create, and I think that works better because having a natural base means it has its own magic of its own kind, because the carrier comes from a natural source, so it has its own energy matrix already, and then it's kind of an infusion process. Now infusion is something we're going to talk about and how to use spell oils. And there's something really, really magical about the process of change that occurs when something is infusing into something else. Because as witches, we put our energy into spells in order to affect change in the world. That's basically what spells are, and it kind of has that kind of same vibe as, say, praying, where we are seeking to change something within our lives by how desperately we want something to occur, and the release of energy, and then pulling at the universe, if you like, pulling at the energy matrix of the universe in order to affect and influence change. And that's, in a nutshell, what spellcrafting is. And that kind of occurs within the spell oils as well, because you have this natural base, this carrier, and then all of these other components come together and start affecting and influencing change within the carrier oil itself. And then it just creates like this potion, this harmony, this energy matrix, this energy web of something which can have a really wonderful influencing effect as part of your spellcraft and can really change up spell work completely. And I don't think enough attention is really paid to what spell oils actually do, because in a lot of circumstances it's kind of viewed as kind of like topping, like here's your cake, put some icing on, done. And not really sort of, it's not really, in my perception of things, to be just icing. It is a magical tool. It has an incredible vibrance all to itself. It's incredibly alive. And I often find that when I take photographs of the spell oils, you will see things within the tapestry. They're almost like their own little paintings. And I will often take pictures and see shapes, quite frequently crows. I took a picture of the Blade Over Shield oil and it had a full-on goddess figure image in it once. And I was like, that's insane! And it's because it taps into that sort of energy of the universe, of what it's supposed to be, and it's almost like a spell in and of itself. So there you go, that's a very waffled explanation of how I perceive spell oils. So I'm going to basically showcase a number of different ways in which you can use spell oils, and speaking broadly, I suppose, they're quite simplistic ways of using spell oils, because I didn't really want to overcomplicate things too much, but there is kind of a theme running through that we kind of have, like a diffusion element, an envelop element, an anoint element, and a submersion element. And as I go through different ways of utilizing spell oils, I'm going to sort of talk about what each of those actually means to me and how that affects the spell work. So I'm going to pause the video, I'm going to shift things around, and then we're going to talk about using particular spell oil. So ready for the first cut, because here it comes. Welcome back after the cut. So the first and easiest and most simplistic use of spell oils is actually for, I'm just going to move the Blade of Avalon oil out actually, is for anointing candles in candle magic. It's perhaps the most well known and most common perhaps use of spell oils that I think you will run into initially, and is a arguably simplistic but very effective method of imbuing candles with an energy for spell work. And it's about creating almost a bridge, a magical focal point for which you bring together elements to create a spell. So in order to anoint a candle, you literally take some of your oil and you can place it on your fingers, as long as it's all natural ingredients, and it's fine for that sort of thing. You can of course use like a little pipette in this, and just drop some on if it's not okay for having on your hands. But the really nice thing about having all natural oils is then you can work it into the candle using your fingers. And if you are working to draw something to you, you're working to attract energies to you in terms of spell work, bring me my lover, bring me my finances, bring me good luck, then you work your spell oil down the candle towards you. You would also perhaps, you know, engrave the candle right on the candle with your wish or desire. You might anoint it with different herbs and as well. I'll refer you back to the Attraction 2017 video where I sort of did that sort of process. And in order to banish things, you then place some oil and work away from you. So it's away, banish that negativity, banish that person, and so on and so forth. It's getting rid of, away rather than towards. Now, the really wonderful thing about working with spell oils in terms of candle anointing is this candle I've chosen on purpose because it's not one of mine. It's a basic 101 spell candle that you can purchase. Now, when you've created your own spell candles or when you have bought from a witch, often spell candles have been infused with an energy all of their own anyway, so they will work even if you don't anoint them, even if you don't alter them. But it's always good to get your hands onto spell items and make them your own a little bit in terms of the magic, in terms of then even if you have purchased an oil and a candle for this work, the act of you combining them is infusing it with your energy and your intention and your purpose, so that you then bring them into your energy field. You bring them into your fold, if you like, and you create the spell. Particularly with candles such as this one, this is a bought spell candle, so effectively it's a blank slate, and it's good to have a white candle for that as well. And it's not infused with any magical energy initially, and therefore the act of inscribing it, understanding its colour symbolism, and having that kind of magic already, but kind of giving that meaning within your own energy field. And then anointing it with the spell oil brings the spell to life. It means that you are focusing your energy and directing the candle, directing the magic into what you want it to do. Now, there's all sorts of wonderful things that spell oils can do in order to trigger your elevated state, to change your energy up. And this is why I love spell oils. Spell oils can be scented. Now, I only use essential oils in mine. And this incredible aroma of scented oil means that it triggers memories in you. It triggers feelings in you. It gets an emotional response, and all magic is based on emotional response. The emotions drive the spell work. So if you really wanted to attract love, for example, and there are certain scents that really radiate a loving energy to you, and maybe they trigger energies and memories of feeling loved, and they just bring love to mind. Or, I mean, perhaps a better analogy is the sexy oils, the ones that make you feel sexy and arouse your senses. And you really want to do that kind of naughty, sensual, lustful energy before spending a weekend with your other half or something, then you would use a spell oil tailored to that sort of evokes those responses in you, because as it is evoking that response to you, the universe is then taking note of your energy state, your evoked and aroused sensibilities, and you're kind of then like, right, I'm setting this into motion, this is what I want, and this is going forward, and then you're tugging and tugging, and the universe reflects that back at you, and you putting that intention out into the universe, and it's very synchronistic. It kind of synchronizes and kind of gives you back what you're putting out, in a sense. But it basically is about changing your state so that you get what you're looking for, and you're setting that intention into the spell work. As well as the anointing direction, which we have discussed. Now, is there anything else I need to discuss about anointing candles? I don't think so. I think for anointing candles, we're good. Now, thanks over there. Right, so whilst we're talking about anointing, anointing is the process of placing one energy, such as a spell oil, onto another magical tool in order to combine the two almost, to change its state and create a magical tool. So it becomes magical from the state of mundane. It kind of elevates the tool which you're using. So we've talked about anointing candles. I'm not going to anoint this because this is wood, but this is a tool. Not that you couldn't anoint wooden things. Most wooden tools do tend to have a finish on them to stop them being damaged by any thing that kind of gets in contact with them, but most of the ones I've got here have a slight coloration, and from all natural ingredients naturally, but it's just something to be aware of. So you can anoint magical tools, spell items, jewellery, crystals. I've got plenty of crystals around. Crystals. I don't have any magical jewellery on hand because that's all put away, but these are all different items which one can influence and affect change with. So for jewellery, for example, you might wear a certain crystal in order to protect yourself. It's probably the easiest energy of magic to actually discuss, and this is an raw obsidian, so this works really well for this. And so then blade over shield is my protection oil, and you could then anoint that crystal before carrying it. And if it's part of your jewellery, then fine. If you're not, if you're just carrying it like so. So as you can see, I have a little pipette here. One drop. And you're just sort of working the energy in, infusing. It's kind of feeding the spell, which is something we will talk about in a little bit. And it creates a extra layer of intention around the crystal. It helps you to, if you like, program the crystal, ask for the help for the crystal, seek the energy, request the energy which you require. So it's a little bit of feeding the crystal, it's a little bit of creating a magical infinity loop, if you like, of it feeds the crystal feeds it, and it creates a nice little energy. Oh gosh, that's all tingling. Oh, tingling. I love Blade Over Shield. It raises my energy so well. Wonderful. And it creates a spell unto itself. So you've kind of affected change in the magical item. This, in this case, a crystal, and you could use it as part and parcel of other parts of spell work as well. So say you were making a spell bag, you could anoint the spell bag, you could anoint the herbs, you could infuse all the things that you're going to put into a spell with a little bit of spell oil, and then it creates a nice tie. It connects everything, it kind of stitches all the spell elements together. On that note, all of the completely natural oils are perfectly skin safe, and we talked about the fact that scent can affect your state of mind and influence your energy and elevate your energy and put an intention in. So, oh, I smell that smell and now I'm aroused, and oh, this weekend's going to be wonderful, and oh, and boom, the magic works from there. I mean, you might wish to partake in ritual, you might wish to partake in spell work, but the intention is set and the smell helps. And then anointing your skin with such items and spell oils can be a really wonderful way of just instantaneously shifting your energy state. I wear Blade Over Shield all the time. I know a few people who do wear a couple of the spell oils as perfumes for the scent. And as I said, it's only essential oils in there, so it should all be fine. Although if you do wear any oil, any spell oil, I can speak for my own, but you should always skin test just in case you're sensitive, and you know, test it a very little bit, make sure you're not going to have a reaction to a certain essential oil or anything like that. But I know people who have it in the hair, I know people who have it in the beard, I know who people who have it on the skin, and I quite frequently put blade over shield, like over my skin where my chakra points are, create a protective barrier. I put it on my hands a lot because obviously your hands are generally your first contact with most physical elements of the world, so it creates a nice protective energy barrier around your hands. And it's a really simplistic but effective way to bring that magic into your aura field, so anointing the skin. Okay, what else have we got for anointing? You can anoint door frames, window frames, and door handles. I think we'll show that on camera. We'll move the camera and we'll show that. So here comes the cut. In perhaps the most fascinating thing I've ever bothered to record on camera, this is a door handle. So the reason for this is so that I can kind of drive home the message of anointing door handles and why. It's just going to be interesting one-handed. So, nice and easy. Now you can go inwards or outwards depending on the magic that you want to perform. Now I'm kind of doing a protection here, so I'm going inwards to create a magical perimeter. If you wanted to do a banish, you go the other way, go out the door. But I'm doing more of a protective element here. So just, now if it was me, and I will do this off camera because you don't need to see it, once I have anointed, I would go over with a cotton pad just to make sure there's no slipperiness on the door, there's no sort of residue on the door, you're not going to get yelled at because you've got oil on the door, that sort of thing. But for anointing in between spaces, spell oils are ideal. You can also create sigils that are invisible and dry. So I'm going to do the sigil for Hawthorn. It's an Owen. And it dries, it's an invisible, but you've created a sigil here, and you can do whatever you want in terms of sigil magic in order to, you know, create a magical sigil in oil that creates a protective barrier. So that being said, we're now going to cut and go look at something a little bit more interesting, hopefully. Okay, so this is the first of the kind of more of the diffusion methods of ways of using spell oil. So this is one of my oil burners with a great big angry pumpkin on it. I love it, it's hilarious. And melting in there is a melt. You can buy melts all over. I really like the elixir of light ones. I also make my meltkins for the store. I really enjoy those. And you can add a few drops of oil for magical diffusion in your oil burner. Now, this works as the scent diffuses into the room. It's a less invasive, kinder to the senses, scent-orientated spell work. So you are elevating the scent in the room, and we've talked about how scent affects us and changes us and is a really integral part of magic. So this is a really wonderful way of diffusing an aroma and the spell work around the room. You have the fire and the liquid here too, and this is actually one way in which some people use the Simply Starry smudges or other loose smudges in an oil burner like this with an oil base, and then they kind of cook the smudge, and you can add a little spell oil to that. You can have the spell oil as your carrier and then put the smudge on top, particularly if they coincide, if they're the same energy range, and that allows the spell oil and the magic to diffuse into the atmosphere and change and affect the room in which it's in, depending on what kind of magic you're actually using. Moving on from oil burners and diffusion that way is the enveloping of water, the submersion and diffusion using water and oil. Now, basic science 101 is that the element of water and the oil does not mix, and that can be utilized within magic. So firstly, you can do a asperge. Now, an asperge is where you use water and elements in the water to cleanse a home. So I'm going to pop some of the Crow Priestess oil in there, and you can see it floating on top, which is lovely. And you can then use your fingers, and some people use, say, like a stem of rosemary or a stem of sage and things, and they would pop that in the water and then they use it to cleanse the home. And that's an alternative to smoke smudging, which is again kinder on the lungs. As well as that though, you can create spell work here for the submersion and enveloping of something in water using oil as a barrier on top. So if you wanted to create a spell that you created a water barrier and you wanted to put something into the barrier that then sinks down into it and represents something, perhaps it's a piece of paper with the spell work written on it, and you don't want that spell to let up until it's done, then you can put oil on the top, and the oil creates a natural film over the top, a natural barrier. So this can be used in very aggressive magic as well as healing magic. Now let's say you're going to then use it in protection magic instead. So we've already anointed this crystal with blade over shield oil, and you want to then place the crystal, and you have infused it with the energy for it to represent you or your home. Maybe you even put a piece of paper in there with the spell on it in, and then you place it in like so, and you're setting the intention of the spell. Now, water in the Celtic tradition works as a conduit between our realm and the realm of the other of the gods, of the Tuatha De Danann. It's considered to be a magical conduit, a crossing over element, if you like. So what you're doing here is perhaps creating an energy to protect yourself and your home from spirits, because you have placed an energy of protection into the conduit in between space and created a barrier over the top. And this is something that I have done on occasion, and I find it really is a different way of doing things. This is unique to me as far as I'm aware. This is something that I came up with, the submersion and envelop version of spell work. Additionally, you can use it to scry in this method. You can put a little bit of oil into water, particularly if it has a colour, and particularly if you are adding it alongside loose herbs, and perform scrying. Because oil sits on the top, and you could then set the intention of the spell work to be divinational, which the Crow Priestess works really well for, and you might put a crystal in there as well. I didn't put very much oil in, and it's not a scrying bowl, so I would use my scrying bowl with the black in, with candles lit so you can see better and see what shapes take form as you perhaps stir it and use it for a form of water divination. It's a really interesting thing with oil because it does move about so freely. Another enveloping energy which you can use is actually using this spell oil in the bath. So if you were taking a cleansing bath and you put your cleansing oils in, you put cleansing salts in and some herbs in, then you can add a few drops of spell oil to the bath, and as long as they're all natural and you enjoy the scent and everything, then you don't mind having a little bit on the skin, and it kind of gives it kind of like that massage effect where you're kind of working it into your skin as part of the submersion process of the cleansing ritual of having a cleansing bath. Right, so there are a couple more anointing that I've just thought of. So I shall take off the altar cloth because you can anoint your altar bases with oils, and I do regularly with the blade over shield. So the Morrigan altar is in process at the minute, so I won't go over there, but you can anoint with a cotton pad is probably the easiest way of doing this. Now if you're using it to cleanse, you might go anti-clockwise, to banish, to get rid of, and then if you were going to imbue, you'll go clockwise. You can go in circles, you can go in squares, it really depends what your fancy is basically, but it's really wonderful for just anointing your altar and sets it up as a sacred space. Basically what you're doing is you are elevating the energies, and it doesn't leave too much of a residue if you only use a little. If you used a bit more, you might want to wait for it to dry off a bit, but I only used a very little, so we're fine. And she says, and then the cloth will not behave itself. But you're creating a sacred space for the altar. You're shifting it from a table into a place where you worship the gods, where you give thanks and offerings. It elevates the energy of a place, it shifts the intention. And to that end, it can be really good for anointing statues. Now, if I move, right, so here we have a Morrigan statue, and I frequently use the blade over shield oil to anoint her statues. So anointing a statue is kind of a offering. It kind of gives respect. It's kind of sort of a maintenance and upkeep of statues, sort of dedicating and rededicating them to your goddess. It kind of again infuses it with a spiritual sense of energy, a spiritual offering. It kind of almost feeds the purpose of the statue, which is to give honour to the divine. It's kind of an act of ritual of offering. You can also, of course, continue to feed ongoing spells with spell oils. So if you had a 7-day candle, if you were using a poppet and you were lighting a new candle every day, if you were feeding something, then you can feed spell oils to it. So poppets are perhaps the easiest to draw parallels here with, and you would place some perhaps on the mouth, depending on what your spell work is you're doing. If it's a poppet where it works in conjunction with a spirit, so you've kind of got a energy attachment, a kind of a fetish deal going on, then you would probably feed it through the mouth. If it was some kind of spell work specifically, say you were trying to heal a leg, you might anoint the leg every day and burn a candle alongside that. So feeding things is another energy which you can use for spell oils. And I think that might be my list. And as I said, let me check. Yes, that's my list. And as I said, it's not a comprehensive list. It's by no means an exhaustive list. It's just some of the ways in which really spoke to me in different ways in which you can use spell oils. So if anybody has any further questions or suggestions, pop them down below. And that's it for this video. Many blessings.